When narcissists avoid hoovering because of shame, they hate it. If you've ever dealt with a narcissist, you know how their behavior can cycle through periods of idealization, devaluation, and then, often, a desperate attempt at reconciliation known as hoovering. Hoovering is the narcissist's attempt to reel you back into their control after you've distanced yourself. They use it as a way to maintain their emotional supply, drawing you back into their web of manipulation. But what happens when the narcissist avoids hoovering, not because they don't want you back, but because of something far more powerful, shame? Imagine the situation. You've experienced the highs and lows of being entangled with a narcissist. You've been the target of their charm, their cruelty, and their insatiable need for validation. But now something has changed. The narcissist isn't pursuing you, isn't trying to suck you back into their chaos. Instead, they seem to avoid it altogether. This avoidance isn't out of indifference. It's driven by something far deeper: shame. In this video, we'll delve into why narcissists avoid hoovering and how their deep-seated shame, which they work so hard to cover up, is the very thing that prevents them from re-engaging with you. We'll explore how shame impacts the narcissist's behavior, why they hate feeling vulnerable, and how it affects their need to control and manipulate others. If you've ever wondered why a narcissist would pull away or avoid hoovering, stay tuned. This insight is something that can help you understand their behaviors in a new light. But before we dive into this topic, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with anyone who may be struggling with the narcissistic individuals in their life. By understanding these dynamics, we can better protect ourselves from the harm narcissists cause. For many of us, shame is a deeply personal experience, something that we feel in the privacy of our own minds. It arises when we feel unworthy, exposed, or as if we have somehow failed to meet the expectations placed upon us, either by ourselves or others. It's a painful and often isolating emotion, something that can sit with us for long periods, gnawing away at our sense of self. But for a narcissist, shame is far more complex and insidious. It is not just an emotion that occasionally surfaces in private moments of vulnerability. For a narcissist, shame is a pervasive and hidden force that operates beneath the surface, buried under layers of grandiosity, arrogance, and an inflated sense of entitlement. The narcissist is almost always on guard, doing everything in their power to project an image of perfection, and they will go to great lengths to ensure that others perceive them as flawless, unshakable, and above reproach. The mere idea of feeling vulnerable, exposed, or less than perfect is a nightmare for them. It is something they can't afford to face, as it threatens the very core of their carefully constructed identity. Shame runs so deep for a narcissist that it is often completely unconscious. It is not something they openly admit or even acknowledge to themselves. Instead, they utilize a wide range of defense mechanisms, such as denial, projection, and deflection, to keep the feeling at arm's length. They may deflect blame onto others, accuse those around them of wrongdoing, or paint themselves as the victim in situations where they are clearly at fault. But the deeper truth is that these tactics are employed in an attempt to avoid confronting the shame that lies beneath. The narcissist can often keep this feeling of shame buried for long periods, but what happens when they are forced to face it? When they are confronted with the reality that they have pushed you away, and now they may never be able to regain control over you or the situation, that's when the true impact of their internal conflict comes to light. For the narcissist, the avoidance of hoovering, attempting to reel you back into their life after pushing you away, comes from a profound internal struggle. On one hand, the narcissist needs to hoover you. They rely on a constant supply of admiration and validation to maintain their fragile sense of self-esteem. They crave the attention, the affirmation, the validation that comes from having someone in their life who looks up to them, who feeds their ego and makes them feel superior. Without this supply, they feel empty, worthless, and lost. Yet, on the other hand, the narcissist's overwhelming sense of shame makes it incredibly difficult for them to take the necessary actions to bring you back into their life. The very thought of being rejected again, of being exposed as vulnerable or imperfect, fills them with an intense sense of dread. This fear is so powerful that it can paralyze them, preventing them from making any attempt to reconnect. Their pride, their deep need to maintain their superiority, clashes with their fear of vulnerability and rejection, and often it is the shame that ultimately wins out. This avoidance can be perplexing to anyone who is trying to understand the narcissist's behavior. From the outside, it may seem completely illogical. You might expect them to return to your life, to beg for your attention, to manipulate you back into their orbit with charm, guilt trips, or promises of change. But instead, they often pull away, retreating into their emotional world, and refusing to acknowledge the reality that they'd lost control over you. It's not because they don't care about you. It's because they care so deeply about maintaining the illusion of power and control that they can't bear to face the possibility that they have failed. They cannot face the shame of being rejected, of being exposed as fallible. The thought of you turning away from them, choosing independence over their manipulation, cuts deeper than they can admit. Narcissists thrive on being seen as powerful, in control, and perfect. They go to great lengths to build and maintain an identity that revolves around the belief that they are special, unique, and deserving of admiration and adoration. This identity is carefully crafted, often at the expense of others, and it is sustained by a constant flow of validation from those around them. The very thought of being seen as anything less than flawless shakes them to their core. This is where shame enters the picture. For a narcissist, shame is the feeling of unworthiness, the crushing realization that they are not as invincible or perfect as they would like to believe. It is a direct threat to their carefully constructed identity, and it is something they will go to great lengths to avoid at all costs. When you pull away from them, when you stop feeding into their need for constant validation and admiration, it exposes a vulnerability they cannot bear to face. It forces them to confront the fact that they are not invulnerable, that they are not above reproach, and that their carefully cultivated persona is fragile. This exposure of weakness is so excruciating for the narcissist that they would rather avoid you completely than risk facing the shame of attempting to re-enter your life and being rejected again. They would rather retreat, hide their wounds, and preserve their illusion of power than face the painful reality of their own vulnerability. The truth is, the narcissist cannot stand rejection. It forces them to question everything they believe about themselves and their ability to control others. The very idea of being confronted with indifference or outright rejection after attempting to hoover you is a devastating blow to their fragile sense of self-worth. If they were to reach out to you and be met with your indifference, apathy, or refusal to engage, it would shatter their illusion of control. It would force them to confront their own insecurities and failings in a way that they are not equipped to handle. For someone whose entire identity revolves around manipulation and control, the idea of being exposed as less than perfect is terrifying. So, rather than face this possibility, the narcissist often chooses to avoid the situation altogether, even if it means losing the very supply they are so desperate to maintain. This avoidance is not a sign that they don't care. It's a defense mechanism born out of an intense fear of exposure and humiliation. The narcissist would rather lose the validation they crave than risk the deeper wound of rejection. And this fear, this shame, will continue to govern their actions as they move forward, often leaving them trapped in a cycle of manipulation, deflection, and denial, unable to truly face the vulnerability they so desperately try to avoid. For the narcissist, their sense of self-worth is not something that comes from within. Unlike many individuals who derive their sense of value from their own internal resources, the narcissist's identity is deeply reliant on how others see them. The constant need for external validation, admiration, and praise becomes the foundation upon which their entire self-concept is built. This dependence on outside approval leaves them extremely vulnerable, especially when it comes to feelings of shame. For a narcissist, shame is not just an occasional or fleeting emotion. It is perceived as an existential threat, something that strikes at the very core of who they believe themselves to be. When faced with the possibility of being exposed, whether that's through being seen for who they truly are, facing the consequences of their actions, or simply being vulnerable, the narcissist's reaction is often intense and drastic. The shame they experience can trigger an emotional crisis of sorts. Rather than confronting the feeling of shame, they will typically do whatever they can to push it away. This may manifest in a variety of defensive behaviors. They might retreat into themselves, isolate from others, or even lash out in anger as a way of protecting themselves from feeling exposed. In their mind, the idea of being seen as anything less than perfect is unbearable. They will go to extreme lengths to avoid this emotional pain, whether through deflection, blame shifting, or attacking others. However, no matter how much they try to suppress or deny their shame, it remains a persistent, driving force in their actions. The narcissist's deep fear of being seen as weak or unworthy is so overwhelming that it often takes precedence over their need for control or even over their need for external validation. The possibility of being seen as vulnerable is so distressing that they would rather avoid the situation entirely than risk feeling exposed. This is one of the main reasons why narcissists sometimes avoid hoovering. Hoovering is a tactic they often rely on to regain control, to restore their sense of superiority, and to ensure a steady supply of validation. But when a narcissist is confronted with the prospect of re-engaging with you, especially after a period of disconnection, they realize that doing so would mean facing their worst fear, the vulnerability that comes with the risk of rejection. They would have to expose themselves in ways that they cannot bear. In their mind, the shame of being rejected or devalued again outweighs any potential benefit they might gain from regaining control over you. The fear of being hurt again, of feeling small or unimportant, is so great that it prevents them from taking action. Rather than risk confronting these painful emotions, they often choose to remain silent or distant, waiting for the overwhelming feelings of shame to subside before they consider making another attempt to reassert control. Denial plays a pivotal role in the narcissist's behavior, particularly when it comes to acknowledging their own flaws, mistakes, or vulnerabilities. Narcissists often cannot bring themselves to admit when they have done something wrong, and they certainly will not acknowledge the existence of their own shame. It is a deeply uncomfortable emotion that they go to great lengths to avoid. They may deny their flaws, convince themselves that they are always right, and refuse to accept responsibility for the harm they cause. Deep down, however, they are well aware of their failings, even if they refuse to acknowledge them publicly. The nagging feeling that they are not as perfect as they would like others to believe eats away at them. This internal conflict between their need to maintain the illusion of superiority and the knowledge that they are, in fact, deeply flawed, creates a vicious cycle of avoidance, defensiveness, and self-deception. Their inability to face their flaws leads them to avoid facing their shame, which then perpetuates their defensive behavior. It's a never-ending loop of denial and avoidance, which leaves them incapable of genuine self-reflection or personal growth. When a narcissist avoids hoovering, it's not because they have no interest in you or no desire to regain control over the situation. It's because they are so consumed by the shame of their own perceived failure that they cannot bear the thought of being exposed again. They cannot allow themselves to be seen as weak or vulnerable. Their fear of rejection is so profound that it outweighs any desire they have to re-enter your life or to regain their position of power. For those who have experienced narcissistic abuse, this behavior can feel incredibly confusing and frustrating. It might appear as though the narcissist has completely moved on, as if they don't care about the impact of their actions, or as if they are indifferent to the pain they have caused. However, the reality is that their silence often speaks volumes. It is a reflection of the emotional turmoil they are experiencing inside. The narcissist's inability to hoover may not be due to a lack of care. It may be the result of an internal battle with their own shame and vulnerability. They are not indifferent to you. Rather, they are deeply afraid of confronting the emotional consequences of their actions. Eventually, they may return. The narcissist's need for validation and control is constant, and they may eventually try to re-enter your life when they feel that enough time has passed, or that the conditions are right. But even when they do, the shame they carry will continue to influence their interactions with you. They may try to manipulate the situation, charm you, or gaslight you into forgiving them or taking them back, but the underlying fear of rejection will always be lurking in the background. Their need for validation will push them to attempt to regain control, but it is not without its complications. The narcissist cannot simply let go of the shame they carry. It will always affect the way they engage with others, especially when they are trying to reclaim the supply they so desperately need. They won't necessarily avoid hoovering forever. Instead, they will engage in it when they feel the time is right, but they will always be calculating, always measuring the risk of rejection against the potential reward. The need for control will push them forward, but the fear of rejection and the possibility of facing their own vulnerability will always make the process far more complex than it might seem from the outside. The narcissist's internal struggle between their need for control, their fear of shame, and their desperate desire for validation creates a complicated and often confusing dynamic. Their avoidance of hoovering is not a reflection of indifference, but rather an expression of the deep emotional conflict they are grappling with. They are constantly balancing the desire for control with the fear of vulnerability, and as long as this internal battle rages, they will continue to seek validation in ways that protect their fragile self-esteem, while avoiding the emotional pain of rejection and shame. Understanding the narcissist's avoidance of hoovering because of shame is a powerful realization. It's a reminder that their arrogance and sense of superiority are just facades, masking deep feelings of insecurity. When you stop feeding into their need for validation, it exposes their vulnerability, and they can't handle it. They hate feeling shame, and this is why they would rather avoid you than face the reality of their failures. If you found this video insightful, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with others who may be going through similar experiences. Understanding narcissism is the first step toward reclaiming your own power and protecting yourself from further manipulation. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the narcissist's psyche. Stay strong, stay aware, and remember that their shame is their burden to carry, not yours. When does your discard start to impact the narcissist? The profound effect of your absence. Have you ever wondered if walking away from a narcissist truly affects them? Let's get real. Your absence doesn't just go unnoticed. It shakes their world in ways they never expected. Welcome back, everyone. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button Give this video a like and share it with someone who might need these insights. Together, we're creating a community that understands the complexities of dealing with narcissists. Today, we're tackling a question that hits home for so many. Asterisk, when does your absence start to impact the narcissist? Asterisk, whether you were discarded or made the courageous choice to leave, you might find yourself wondering, asterisk, do they even care? Asterisk, the truth is, the void you leave behind is more profound than they'll ever admit. Stick with me as we explore how your decision to step away challenges their carefully crafted facade and leaves a lasting impression. You won't want to miss this one. When a narcissist discards you, or when you finally reach the breaking point and decide that you've had enough, it can feel like they've moved on in the blink of an eye. Perhaps you see social media posts flaunting a new supply or notice their sudden silence, as if they've erased every trace of your existence without a second thought. It's an incredibly jarring experience, leaving you questioning the depth of your connection and the authenticity of everything you shared. It might seem as though your time together was nothing more than a fleeting chapter in their story. However, this surface-level appearance is misleading. Beneath their outward indifference lies a far more complex reality. The absence of someone as significant as you creates an undeniable void in their life, one that they might not immediately recognize or fully understand. What's particularly fascinating about a narcissist's response to your departure is how quickly your absence begins to affect them. While they may project an image of being completely unbothered, their inner world tells a very different story. For a narcissist, the validation, attention, and energy you provided were not just perks of the relationship. They were lifelines. Whether it was your emotional support, physical presence, or simply the stability you brought into their chaotic existence, these elements became essential to their sense of control and superiority. The loss of these sources of supply doesn't go unnoticed, even if they refuse to acknowledge it openly. When a narcissist discards you, it's rarely because they found someone inherently better. Instead, it's usually because they've convinced themselves that the next person will somehow be easier to manipulate, less demanding, or more willing to cater to their needs. This belief often stems from their superficial and transactional view of relationships. Narcissists don't assess people based on their intrinsic qualities or genuine compatibility. They measure others by what they can extract, whether it's admiration, status, or resources. This shallow evaluation, while serving their short-term needs, often leads them into situations that backfire. What they fail to realize is that true connection and genuine support cannot be replicated or replaced as easily as they imagine. In the immediate aftermath of your departure, a narcissist may try to convince themselves, and anyone else who will listen, that they've upgraded to someone more suitable. They might go out of their way to showcase their new relationship, posting exaggerated displays of happiness or highlighting aspects of their life that they know will sting. But this is often a smokescreen designed to mask the discomfort they're feeling inside. Without the steady flow of supply that you once provided, they start to experience a form of withdrawal, even if they don't fully recognize it. The attention they seek from a new source might provide a temporary high, but it lacks the depth and reliability they've come to rely on. This is where the cracks in their facade begin to show. Narcissists often overestimate their ability to replace significant people in their lives. Their inflated sense of self leads them to believe that new supply will seamlessly fill the gap, offering the same level of validation and support. However, as time goes on, they frequently discover that this isn't the case. The new supply may not live up to their expectations, or they might start to realize that the dynamic isn't as effortless as they'd hoped. This realization can be jarring for a narcissist who thrives on control and predictability. When the new relationship fails to deliver the same sense of stability or admiration, they're left grappling with a growing sense of dissatisfaction. For you, witnessing this process can be both painful and enlightening. It's natural to feel hurt by their apparent indifference and quick replacement of you, but it's crucial to understand that their actions are not a reflection of your worth. Narcissists operate on a different emotional wavelength, one that prioritizes their own needs above all else. Their inability to value others for who they truly are often leaves them trapped in a cycle of dissatisfaction and unfulfilled relationships. This pattern is a direct consequence of their shallow approach to connections, an approach that inevitably fails to provide the depth and meaning they secretly crave, but can never fully grasp. The thrill of acquiring a new supply often brings a narcissist a fleeting sense of excitement. It's a rush, a temporary high that gives them the illusion of having upgraded or moved on seamlessly. But beneath this superficial layer of euphoria lies an emptiness they cannot fully articulate. The excitement they feel is fragile, shallow, and entirely dependent on the novelty of the new person. As this initial spark fades, they begin to notice what's missing. Slowly but surely, it dawns on them that the new supply doesn't match the depth, support, and stability you once provided. This realization rarely gets them all at once. Instead, it creeps up on them like a shadow, growing heavier as their new supply inevitably falls short of their ever-escalating expectations and insatiable needs. The truth is, narcissists don't miss you in the way most people think of missing someone. They don't pine for you because they loved you or truly valued you in a reciprocal, healthy sense. What they miss is the role you played in their orchestrated narrative. You weren't just a person to them. You were a vital source of validation, a consistent provider of admiration, and an anchor of emotional energy. Without you, their carefully curated world starts to unravel. Things feel less vibrant, less predictable, and far less under their control. The absence of someone who once centered so much of their emotional supply leaves a void that is hard to ignore, even if they are unwilling to admit it outwardly. Even when they secure a new replacement, the inadequacy of their choice becomes glaring over time. The new supply, no matter how eager or accommodating, often lacks the unique qualities they took for granted in you. This is especially pronounced if you were what is commonly referred to as grade a supply. Unlike surface-level admirers who only feed the narcissist's ego, grade a supply offers a deeper connection, emotional depth, unwavering support, and perhaps even a sense of grounding that the narcissist depends on more than they realize. While they may have dismissed your contributions as routine or expected during the relationship, your absence forces them to confront just how integral you were to their sense of stability and importance. For narcissists, timing plays an intriguing role in how they feel your absence. For some, the void you leave is immediate. The moment they no longer have access to you, whether because you walked away or they discarded you, the gap in their life becomes glaring. They may not show it on the surface, but the loss of their primary source of validation sends ripples through their emotional world. For others, the impact takes longer to set in. Weeks or even months may pass before they fully grasp what they'd lost, often because their focus is initially consumed by the novelty of their new supply. But eventually, reality catches up with them. The new person, despite their best efforts, cannot meet the narcissist's relentless demands or replicate the dynamic you once shared. It's important to understand that this failure on the part of the new supply isn't due to any inherent flaw in them as a person. Rather, it's because they are not you. The unique qualities you brought into the narcissist's life cannot be duplicated, no matter how hard the narcissist tries to mold their new supply into a similar role. The emotional depth, the patience, and the unwavering support you provided were tailored to the person you are, something no one else can easily replicate. This realization, even if subconscious, begins to gnaw at the narcissist over time. As the narcissist becomes increasingly dissatisfied with their new supply, their mind often drifts back to you. They may start to romanticize the past, conveniently forgetting the reasons the relationship ended or the harm they caused. This selective memory is a coping mechanism, one that allows them to avoid taking responsibility for their actions while simultaneously yearning for what they once had. They may not explicitly acknowledge the role you played in their stability, but the discomfort they feel without you speaks volumes. Whether they realize it immediately or it takes time for the truth to set in, one thing becomes clear: your absence leaves a mark that cannot be easily erased. This is where the narcissist's greatest weakness comes into focus. Their inability to form deep, meaningful and reciprocal connections means they're perpetually chasing an illusion, an ideal of validation and admiration that they can never truly hold on to. They crave the high of feeling important and valued, but they lack the emotional capacity to appreciate or nurture the people who provide them with this sense of worth. It's as though they are forever reaching out for something, yet their hands are incapable of grasping it in a way that brings lasting fulfillment. This endless pursuit leaves them in a state of emotional hunger, always looking for the next source of validation while remaining blind to the damage they leave in their wake. Once you've removed yourself from their grasp, their reaction often speaks volumes. You might notice a surge of activity on their part, a desperate, almost frenzied attempt to project an image of happiness and success. They may post excessively on social media, flaunting a new relationship, exciting adventures, or a seemingly perfect life that's curated to make you think they've effortlessly moved on. Every smile in a photo, every boastful caption, is not an expression of genuine joy, but a calculated move to maintain control. They want to craft a narrative where they appear unbothered and thriving, but beneath this facade lies an unmistakable void. At the same time, they may try to engage with you indirectly. Instead of reaching out to you directly, they might use mutual friends, shared acquaintances, or subtle gestures to insert themselves into your awareness. This could look like leaving comments on mutual friends' posts, sending vague messages that seem intended to provoke curiosity, or finding other ways to ensure you notice their presence. None of these actions stem from genuine happiness or a desire for closure. Instead, they are rooted in their need to confirm their lingering significance in your life. The narcissist doesn't necessarily want you back. They want to know they still occupy your thoughts and emotions. This obsessive need to remain relevant stems from their fragile and inflated ego, which requires constant affirmation to feel secure. Even after you've walked away, they can't let go of the idea that they should still matter to you. They want to believe they hold enough power to provoke a reaction, to disrupt your peace, or to remind you of the role they played in your life. This need for significance isn't about love or loss. It's about control. They want to feel that even in your absence, they retain some measure of influence over you. But here's the most important thing to remember. While your absence may create turmoil for the narcissist, it is also your greatest source of empowerment. By choosing to step away from their toxic influence, you are reclaiming your time, your energy, and your sense of self-worth. Every moment you spend apart from their manipulation is a step towards healing and rediscovering your own strength. While they may struggle with the void left by your departure, their struggle is not your responsibility. You do not have to carry the weight of their inability to process loss or their need for constant validation. Breaking free from a narcissistic relationship is not simply about understanding their behaviors or motivations. It's about prioritizing your own well-being. It's about shifting the focus from them to you, allowing yourself the space to heal, grow, and rebuild. When you choose to prioritize your own needs, you break the cycle of manipulation and regain the control they once held over you. It's in this space of self-prioritization that you find clarity, peace, and the ability to thrive without their influence. The narcissist might continue to act out, projecting an image of happiness or attempting to lure you back into their orbit, but their actions lose their power when you focus on yourself. The energy they once drew from you now fuels your own growth. Every boundary you set, every step you take toward healing, and every moment of self-reflection moves you closer to a life that's free from their grasp. Your absence forces them to confront their emptiness, but more importantly, it allows you to fill the spaces they once occupied with self-love, peace, and resilience. As you move forward, you begin to see that healing is not just about leaving the narcissist behind. It's about stepping into a version of yourself that's stronger, wiser, and more aligned with your own truth. The space you create by walking away is not a void, but an opportunity, a chance to rebuild your life on your own terms. While the narcissist continues to struggle with their inability to hold on to meaningful connections, you thrive in your newfound freedom, proving to yourself that you are far more powerful than they ever wanted you to believe. Thank you so much for staying with us through this exploration of how your absence impacts the narcissist. If you found this discussion insightful, please give this video a like, share it with someone who might need it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Your support means the world to us, and we're so grateful to have you as part of our community. Until next time, take care of yourself and remember, you are stronger than you know. When narcissists avoid hoovering because of shame, they hate it. If you've ever dealt with a narcissist,